We are now under R-25, Councillor Gibson. That is item K.
Thank you, Mr. President. R-125 directs the city attorney to withdraw the city attorney's motion for attorney fees and costs in the matter of Katherine Han-Noggle and Elizabeth Wallbro versus City of ABQ et al. One will be passed.
We have a motion and a second. And we have one person signed up to speak, Tom Dent. I think Tom Dent has left the building. We will open this up to debate before the council. Are there any questions? Councilor Harris.
I just have a comment. Initially, I was kind of sympathetic or supportive of the concept of dropping any attorney fee claims against the Han family, because the Han family is, unlike some other litigation we talk about, not likely to continue, it's isolated. However, when I learned more about it, it seems that what the bill would really do is allow the Han family to appeal, to continue their appeal without having any risk involved if they lose that appeal. So I offered an amendment in the Finance Committee, which would be that we would drop our attorney fees against the Han family if they drop their appeal, and we all just walk away. We just leave it alone. But that amendment failed. And really, this is a bad resolution of the ordinance,
Yes.
because it would just promote, like the other bills, I think, litigation and risk-free opportunities to sue the city level, to invite lawsuits, get the council involved in pending litigation. So for that reason, I'm going to oppose this, because, and again, if the Han family wanted to drop their litigation against the city, I think it would be able to do it. But because the Han family just wants to use the city council to get involved in pending litigation and allow them to go ahead and appeal something that they already lost, and not have any consequences if it goes again, then that reason I oppose it.
Let me say, Councilor Gordon, the City Council did not get involved in pending litigation. This issue was a petition filed by our City Attorney to collect legal fees based on the case. So to say the City Council was involved in, litigation on this case is wrong. But again, I think this is basically going through the appellate courts. I cannot believe that we would go out and try to recover legal fees when this is still an ongoing case with the courts. So, I definitely support this legislation. I think that we were wrong in suing the Han family and trying to petition to recover some legal fees. There's a lot of cases. I know that there was a bill that was introduced, I think 2 weeks ago, and it involved Darren White's wife. She filed a lawsuit against the city, but that case was dropped by her and Mr. White. We didn't seek legal fees because they dropped that lawsuit. And this is kind of an unusual situation. I think if the city attorney needs to file lawsuits for frivolous lawsuits and recover some of the costs, that is understandable. But this case is still before the Court of Appeals. I think we should let this process work itself through before we start petitioning for legal fees.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think there might be a misunderstanding. Maybe we have David Tourek on that, but I believe what happens is that because they lost, and this is something that lawyers know, and it sounds kind of, unsympathetic, but the problem with this case from any lawyer is that people who are deceased don't have civil rights. People who are deceased don't have privacy rights. And I believe it's kind of clear that that was a problem that the Han family had by pursuing this litigation. But I believe that there is a time period where after the case was dismissed that the city had to file a motion. So that's why they did file a motion. And if the Han family cleans the clock on appeal, then any attorney fees that we win below will also go away, because I think they will. So, Mr. Tourek, can you talk about that?
Again, before we have Mr. Tourek speak, I'm going to ask that we suspend the rules and extend this meeting until 11 p.m.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, signify by saying yes. Yes, opposed, that carries unanimously. Mr. Tourek, will proceed.
Mr. President, Councillor Harris, the complaint that was filed in federal court, 3 complaints were filed against Alan Banks, former chief, DC Elizabeth Pice, DC Paul Feist, Commander Ray Mason, and Tricia Hoffman, who are all Albuquerque police officers, or were at one time. That case was dismissed, and the judge dismissed it on a 12B6 motion, which means you didn't even state a claim. They didn't even get into facts. Procedurally, your case is barred because you can't state a claim. You're correct about the civil rights interpretation, that she didn't have a claim from the beginning. She has now prolonged this lawsuit. She's continuing to sue these good officers, these APD officers, former APD officers who you've given proclamations to in federal court in the 10th Circuit. This case is prolonged. We're still spending money defending this lawsuit. And we will continue to defend this lawsuit. But that's what they're asking, and that's what this resolution will allow for, a risk-free appeal. I've never petitioned for anything, Counselor. I filed a motion in a pending case that we have been sued on. I've never filed a lawsuit where we haven't been sued first. They have sued us on any case that redistricting, we were sued first. The Han case, the city and the city employees were sued first. We have an obligation to defend city employees to the fullest extent and zealously defend these people, and that's what we're doing.
I have one question, and based on what you just stated, you know, what decision are you making when you pick the cases out where you're making the motion to recover some legal fees? I mean, there's a lot of people who filed lawsuits against the city. This one was a high-profile case, the Han case, and the other issue was regarding the redistricting. But I mean, when are you making these decisions, and why are you making decisions to pick out specific cases?
I don't necessarily make the decision myself, but in this instance, we can take this case. 3 separate complaints were filed by the Han family. 3 separate complaints trying to defeat a motion to dismiss. And the complaint was dismissed with prejudice. That is continuing on. You brought up the Darren White instance, for example. That case, they never appealed anything, and that case went away. We look at it on a case-by-case basis and the ability for recovery too. If someone wants to prolong litigation and from the get-go make frivolous claims against good Albuquerque police officers and continue to make frivolous claims against good Albuquerque police officers, we're going to go and we're going to try and zealously represent them to the fullest extent. That's what we're doing. We're still in court defending this lawsuit.
Any other questions? Councilor Gordon.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Tourek, so I'm confused. If we lose on appeal, what happens then? You return the money that you might have recouped? Or do we just continue spending money defending?
Mr. President, Councilor Gardeno, if it's reversed, we're back to square one. We're defending a lawsuit in federal court.
And so it was frivolous for us to then try and recoup lawyers' fees for the first suit, if on appeal it's found that there was merit?
Mr. President, Councilor Gardeno, we'll recover the fees that are being spent in defending this in the appellate courts.
And then the Han family could then sue us for going after the...
No, Mr. President, Councilor Gardeno, we've won. The city of Albuquerque has won in federal court.
On appeal if we lose.
And that's, if on appeal, and that's what we're basically talking about, a risk-free appeal in federal court up in the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals.
Right, and you lose?
No, Mr. President, Councilor Gardeno, if we prevail and it's upheld, we get all those fees back, plus the fees that we spent having to defend it in the 10th Circuit.
If we don't prevail, what happens then?
Are you, Mr. President, Councilor Gardeno, are you asking us to not defend in the 10th Circuit?
Well, that would probably be the most prudent thing to do. But if we do pursue and don't prevail, what happens then?
Again, Mr. President, Councilor Gardeno, if they are successful in their appeal, it goes back to federal court for square one.
And they could sue us for
No, Mr. President.
defamation or...
No, Mr. President, Councilor Gardeno, there's no such thing for defamation. They're appealing in...
Yes, I understand that. What I'm saying is that if we lose on appeal, we go back to square one and then what?
We litigate the case.
So we're doing it all over again, not having learned anything?
Mr. President, Councilor Gardeno, the 10th Circuit case law that exists right now is they don't have a claim. That's what the district court interpreted and said, that there is no such claim, there's no such animal. That's why they dismissed it with prejudice, which means That's a big deal for attorneys to get a case dismissed with prejudice. That means you don't get to file your lawsuit ever again.
So on appeal, nothing is settled.
Mr. President, Councilor Gardino, if we prevail on appeal and the case is upheld, we get the fees that were originally requesting the court.
You keep answering the question with the same answer. I'm saying if we lose on appeal, what happens then? You're saying back to square one.
We're litigating the case, Mr. President, Councilor Gardino.
Okay? And what I'm saying is that we haven't gained anything, have we? If we lose. Except to learn that we were wrong.
Mr. President, Councilor Gardino, we would still be wrong. We would be litigating the case. The court made a ruling based on case law that there's no such case, not us. We told the court what the case law was, and they agreed.
And so you're saying that they're appealing for no apparent reason?
Mr. President, Councilor Gardino, correct.
That's an opinion. Thank you, Mr. President.
Councilor Harris.
I think that Councilor Gardino actually had a point, and I don't think perhaps he was speaking the right language, but one thing that happens that people don't understand is that when you conclude a lawsuit and it goes on appeal, the jurisdiction of the trial court stops except for a couple little things. One of them is attorney fees.
Correct.
There's a period of time when you have to file that motion for attorney fees.
Correct.
So it's a kind of an anomaly where you get, the case got dismissed, the Hans had 30 days to appeal, and we had a similar amount of time to file our attorney fees motion.
Mr. President, Councilor, correct. Harris, correct.
And then if you go up to the Court of Appeals, and let's say the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals wants to distinguish that case law that the district court found part of this case, it says, the Han family really does have a lawsuit, we're going to reverse the trial court, we're going to send it back down, and we're going to have a trial. Now, the question that Councilor Gardino was asking over and over again, and I don't think he answered, is that what happens to that attorney fees award that if we actually won it?
Mr. President, Councilor Harris said that's what he was asking. There would be no recovery. It would be wait until the end, and then we would have to request the court, if we prevail again, to award that again.
And if we actually were to win the attorney fee award on motion while it's pending appeal, I mean, would the city actually try to enforce that monetary award, or just wait until everything shakes out?
We would have to pursue it after the appeal is concluded.
So if we won on attorney fees motion, went up to the 10th Circuit, we would just kind of hold until the 10th Circuit decided, and then if the 10th Circuit came back and said it's reversed, then does the attorney's fees go away at that point?
Mr. President, Councilor Harris, we'd be back to square one, correct?
Okay. So I think that's the question Councilor Gardino was asking.
Okay, let's go to Councilor Gibson to close.
Well, I'm not an attorney. I don't need to be an attorney.
Thank you, all right.
But this is what I know. The city attorney is not defending the city with this action. The city attorney is doing exactly what I was talking about 20 minutes ago, advancing some philosophical underlying thing. And they're punishing the family who's already had a great loss. And I'm told by this family, people close to this family, that the reason they filed the initial lawsuit was simply to get answers from a city and a police department who were not cooperative in giving them answers. So I can tell you this, if that were my sister, and the police went to investigate her death, I'd be screaming, and everybody in here would be doing the same thing. But somehow, there are those of us in this room who can't put ourselves in that position, and that is a crying shame. It's a crying shame. And as a city, we ought to be ashamed of ourselves, every single one of us, for perpetuating this. I urge your support.
We have a motion and a second to approve R-125. All those in favor, raise your hand and say yes. Yes, opposed? That carries on a 5-4 vote. We are now under